if we're talking about food chains versus food webs, we need to understand the difference between these two, representations of what happens in an ecosystem, because they both represent something happening in an ecosystem. But they represent two very different things. Okay, first of all, what is a food chain?
A food chain is like a simple showing of from one to the other instead of a whole ecosystem.
Okay, so a food chain is a linear demonstration of energy being transferred from one organism to the next within an ecosystem. Okay, and what I mean by that is we'll have a plant that gets eaten by an herbivore, let's say. Okay, and actually here, that gets eaten by an herbivore. As this plant gets eaten by the herbivore, the energy that was in the plant from photosynthesis gets incorporated into the herbivore, and the herbivore can do day-to-day things. Like, walking and drinking and looking for more plants to eat. And, making a home and protecting its young, having young. Having babies is tremendously energy costly. Okay? Now, what happens to our herbivore in this situation?
It eats the plant that gets eaten by the carnivore.
It gets eaten by the carnivore. Now the arrow goes from the herbivore to the carnivore, and what does that signify?
The energy that the herbivore got from the plant, the carnivore will now eat the energy that the herbivore had, as well as the energy from the plant.
So this carnivore is getting all the energy from the organisms that were eaten before. Now, unfortunately, this is not super efficient because the herbivore is not giving over all of the energy that it got from the plant because it needed to use some for its day-to-day life. So we see that carnivores will have to eat a lot of herbivores in order to get enough energy. Herbivores will have to eat a lot of producers in order to get a lot of energy. Now, is this food chain a good representation of what happens in an ecosystem? Avery. Do you think that if I just saw this food chain that I would know everything that was going on in the ecosystem? No, I wouldn't, right? Why? Why is that? Leah?
Oh, because you don't know every animal that carnivore eats or the herbivore eats. You need to know that's like what food.
In looking at this actual food chain, I'm only seeing a glimpse, a small little bit of the interactions that are occurring in this ecosystem. I don't see much else, right? So, what I need to know instead is that if I want a big picture, I'm going to want a food web. Food webs look at all of the organisms inside an ecosystem, and they see who eats what. Certain organisms can have more than one predator. Certain organisms can have several types of prey. The higher up we go on the food chain, though, the less, tertiary or quaternary predators there should be in a food web. Case in point, the food web in your iBook, it's not going to have 50 lions for 20 giraffes in that ecosystem because that's just not sustainable. Okay, all those giraffes will be eaten, then the lions will starve because they will run out of food. Okay, does that make sense?
Animals are like at the top of the food.
A lot of times when we're talking about food webs, we also talk about something called an energy pyramid. Okay? or a pyramid. The amount of organisms in a food web behave similar to the structure of a pyramid. So if I've got my pyramid like so, okay, and I'm going to go down here, and then we got the, okay, there's my three-dimensional pyramid. Okay, but if I've got this pyramid like this, and I mean, I can just make it a two-dimensional pyramid. Okay, so if I do this, what you're going to see is at the bottom of the pyramid, okay, you're going to see your producers. There need to be a lot of producers in any food web. If there aren't, the food web will collapse. It cannot sustain itself. That means it cannot keep going. Okay, what comes after?
Herbivores?
Yeah. So there will be a lot of herbivores, but there will be less herbivores. Okay, what do you think comes next? Okay, so you're going to get probably your tertiary carnivores. And then you're going to get your quaternary carnivores. And then if there's something above that, okay, you're going to get your penultimate carnivores, or the kind of the top of the food chain sort of deal. Notice how the actual pyramid gets narrower and narrower and narrower as we get to the top. The decrease in size is proportional to the amount of those organisms in a food web. So a food web, the larger base, means you're going to have the most producers. A lot of producers. Then you're going to have a smaller amount of herbivores, but you're still going to have a lot. Then you're going to have an even smaller amount of carnivores, an even smaller amount of larger carnivores, and the smallest amount of your topmost carnivores. Okay? Does that make sense? This is in the vast majority of natural habitat ecosystems. There is one ultimate, basically predator that does not conform to this. Which one is it? No, be specific.
Humans?
Right here. Okay, humans don't necessarily conform to that upper level predator behavior because there's a lot of us. Okay, but it's not all of us that are out there, impacting or hunting in these different food webs. Okay?